The infant's screams tore through the frozen Montana night. Sarah Whitlow pressed frost-cracked hands against her 2-month-old son's rigid back, but Thomas only wailed harder, his face crimson with hunger and cold. Her breasts ached with emptiness. No milk had flowed since 3 days ago when strangers dragged her husband Lewis's broken body from the overturned sleigh, his skull-caved-in eyes staring at the pitiless January sky. The cabin fire had burned to embers. Wind shrieked through gaps in the log walls, hurling snow like glass. The single candle guttered violently. Sarah rocked Thomas faster, her lullaby cracking on every syllable. 23 years old, widowed after 8 months of marriage, stranded 15 miles from Sable Junction in brutal 1876. Montana winter, she'd never felt death this close. Her pulse hammered in her throat as Thomas's cries grew weaker. The door latch rattled. Sarah's breath caught her heart slamming against her ribs. She clutched Thomas tight, her eyes darting to the rusted knife on the table. The latch lifted. Cold air rushed in, extinguishing the candle. A silhouette filled the doorway, broad shoulders wrapped in buffalo hide, long black braids glittering with frost eyes, catching ember glow like obsidian. A Lakota man, tall, weathered copper skin, a pale scar along his jaw. Every horror story from back east surged through Sarah's mind. Her hands shook, her breathing shallow and rapid. But the man made no threatening move. He stepped inside, carefully unslung a bundle, draped a warm buffalo robe over the crib, and placed a tin cup on the table. Steam curled upward. The scent of fresh mare's milk filled the air like answered prayer. The man spoke, voice low and measured. "Warm this milk over the coals, then we ride. Other men come soon, white men hunting with bad intent." Sarah's fear warred with maternal desperation. Desperation won. She reached for the cup, her fingers barely able to grasp it properly, her whole body trembling. He turned to the fireplace, coaxing flame back to life. Light grew, revealing his face, high cheekbones, the scar eyes holding lifetimes of watchfulness. He wrapped the buffalo robe around her shoulders, his fingertips brushing her collarbone. She flinched, her breath hitching. He withdrew immediately, hands raised in peace. "My name is Kangi Sapa, Black Raven. I heard your child crying from the ridge. If you stay here tonight, you both die before sunrise. I can take you to safety, warmth, and milk for the baby. But you must choose freely." Sarah looked at Thomas, at the steaming milk, at the fire this stranger had rekindled, at the unwavering certainty in his eyes. Her throat tightened as she forced herself to breathe more evenly. "All right, we'll ride with you." He gathered supplies efficiently, his movements precise and economical. "Who will come?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Men watching this cabin. 2 riders on iron-shod horses. They watch but don't help. They wait for something." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the scar. "Those who watch in concealment are more dangerous than those who attack openly." Thomas drank the warm milk greedily. Sarah felt tears stream down her face, her chest loosening slightly for the first time in days. Kangi Sapa fashioned a carrying sling and helped Sarah strap Thomas against her chest, his hands careful and respectful. Outside, a paint mare stood waiting, breath steaming in the frozen air. "Hold tight," Kangi Sapa said. "The trail is treacherous." They plunged into the storm. Snow fell in blinding curtains. Sarah pressed against his back, feeling his steady breathing drawing strength from it. Her own breath came in short gasps, each one burning her lungs, but gradually his rhythm steadied hers. The journey seemed endless, steep ravines, frozen creeks, skeletal trees groaning ominously. Finally, firelight appeared through the snow, a Lakota lodge in a sheltered hollow. A young woman emerged, high cheekbones, intelligent eyes, long braided hair. She spoke rapidly to Kangi Sapa, concern threading through her tone. He answered, gesturing to Sarah and Thomas. The woman's expression softened. She took Thomas and began nursing him alongside her own infant, without hesitation, her movements confident and sure. Relief flooded through Sarah so powerfully her knees buckled. Kangi Sapa guided her to soft furs near the fire. Rest without fear. My sister Nayeli will feed your child. You're safe. You have my word. Sarah lay back and for the first time in 3 days, closed her eyes without terror. Sarah woke to pale sunlight and rhythmic grinding. Thomas slept peacefully in a cradleboard. Nayeli smiled and gestured to hot tea. Kangi Sapa entered, brushing snow from his shoulders. His expression carried trouble. His shoulders tense, his eyes sharp. He spoke rapidly to Nayeli, then turned to Sarah. I've been scouting. The 2 riders are now joined by 4 more men, maybe 5. One wears a badge. They're searching for you. His eyes locked on hers, unwavering. Why would lawmen hunt a widow with a newborn? Sarah's throat closed. Her pulse quickened, blood rushing in her ears. Then, voice breaking, she told him everything. She described arriving in Sable Junction pregnant and eager to join Lewis, who worked for Slade and Mercer stage lines. His letters had grown troubled, then stopped. A terse telegram. Come immediately. She'd found not Lewis, but Uriah Slade, who told her Lewis died in a blizzard accident near Copper Creek Mine. Slade gave her a tin box, Lewis's effects. Inside a shattered watch, a blood-stained ledger page, an unsealed letter to Federal Marshal Valdez. Lewis wrote that he'd discovered fraud. Slade and Sheriff Mercer were targeting women traveling west alone, mail-order brides' widows. They'd seize their savings under false debts, then sell them to mining camps. Sarah's hands shook as she pulled out the ledger page. This documents the fraud. I believe they murdered him for it. Kangi Sapa studied the paper, his jaw working, tendons standing out in his neck. This is why they hunt you. Slade sent me to that cabin, promised someone would check on me. No one came. They wanted me and Thomas to die quietly. Her voice steadied slightly. But you found us first. He folded the paper carefully, his movements deliberate. We must keep you and this evidence safe. He spoke to Nayeli at length. She responded fiercely, but worried, her hands gesturing emphatically. You cannot stay here, he said finally, his tone resigned, but firm. If lawmen find a white woman in our camp, they'll manufacture charges and bring soldiers. You need white allies. There's a homesteader named Owen Pike. Lewis helped him once. He may honor that debt. When do we leave? Before dawn. Can you ride again through cold? Yes. Sarah's chin lifted, her jaws setting. I won't let them win. Something shifted in his eyes, respect. He nodded. Then we prepare. Nayeli gave them supplies, dried meat, water, herbs. She touched Sarah's cheek, then Thomas's forehead, whispering blessings. They departed in darkness. Halfway to Owen's homestead, hoofbeats echoed across the frozen river. Kangi Sapa pulled them into a ravine, his body coiling tight, every muscle ready. He cut brush for cover movements, swift and silent. Through gaps, Sarah saw torchlight. 2 riders, one bulky in bearskin, one tall with a badge. Sheriff Mercer. Sarah's heart hammered so hard, she felt dizzy, her vision narrowing. Tracks lead this direction, Mercer said, his voice carrying across the ice. That Lakota scout took the widow. We bring him in on kidnapping charges. The bulky man, buckskin, shifted. She worth all this trouble? She's worth whatever Slade says. Lewis Whitlow was poking into the ledgers. If the widow has papers, we clean it up permanently. If not, Slade can use her in the mountain camps. Pretty thing like her will earn back her husband's debts. His tone was flat, businesslike, utterly cold. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Her breath came in short, silent gasps, her chest constricting. Mercer continued, "Check the camp. If they're hiding her, we take everyone into custody." The riders moved on. Kangi Sapa waited a full minute before relaxing, his breathing controlled and even. "You understand what we face?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak, her throat too tight. "These men wear law as a weapon. If we're caught, I hang as a kidnapper, you vanish into their camps, Thomas goes to an orphanage or worse." His eyes bored into hers. "So we don't get caught. We reach Pike, find allies, and fight them with real law. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered, forcing the word past her constricted throat. They continued, reaching the frozen Little Crow River at sunrise. Ice stretched like polished glass, marked with pressure ridges and dark patches. Kangi Sapa pulled out a long pole. "Follow exactly where I step. Swift current runs beneath. One wrong step, we're in water cold enough to kill in minutes." He tested each area carefully, his movements precise and patient. Sarah followed, heart hammering every creak, sounding like catastrophe. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she forced each step forward. Halfway across, a sharp crack split the air. Dark water seeped through a fissure. The mare snorted, eyes rolling. Kangi Sapa kept one firm hand on the animal's bridle, murmuring in Lakota, his voice steady despite the danger. Another crack, louder, closer. He lunged forward, pulling them across as ice collapsed behind with a hissing splash. They scrambled onto the far bank, gasping. Sarah's legs gave out. Kangi Sapa caught her elbow, his grip steadying. "You did well. The worst is past." She pressed her forehead briefly against his shoulder, her breath coming in ragged gasps. His hand came to her back, lingering warm through her layers. "We should continue." They reached Owen Pike's homestead by full sunrise log cabin, sagging barn chicken coop. Smoke rose from the chimney. Kangi Sapa knocked. The door opened a crack. A shotgun barrel emerged, followed by a suspicious face. Owen Pike leaned, sun-creased, wary. "State your business." "I'm Kangi Sapa. This is Sarah Whitlow, widow of Lewis Whitlow. You knew her husband. She needs help, and I'm collecting the debt you owe his memory." Owen's eyes widened. "Lewis Whitlow's wife. What happened?" "They killed my husband," Sarah said, voice cracking but carrying steel, her fists clenching at her sides. "Mercer and Slade. They're running fraud, stealing from women. Lewis discovered it. Now they're hunting me. Please, I have a baby and nowhere else to turn." Owen stood motionless and then lowered the shotgun. "Get inside, quickly." Inside, Owen poured coffee, his movements quick and efficient. Sarah told him everything, showed him the documents. Owen read carefully, his face darkening, a vein pulsing in his temple. "I knew something was wrong. Lewis stopped coming to poker night. When I asked, Slade said he was ill. But I saw Lewis 3 days later looking terrified. He pulled me aside, said he'd found something bad in the books." Owen's jaw tightened, his knuckles white on the coffee cup. "That was the last time I saw him. 2 weeks later, Slade announces he died in a blizzard accident." "We need allies," Kangi Sapa said, his tone practical, his eyes scanning the room as if already planning defense. "People Mercer can't silence." Owen nodded, rubbing his jaw. "Doc Franklin Keats been the town physician for 20 years. Mercer can't touch him because he's the only doctor for 50 miles. And Winifred Hale, the school teacher. She operates the telegraph. If we can get word to the marshal without Slade intercepting, then we have a chance." Sarah finished, her breathing steadier, now determination replacing despair. Owen grabbed his coat. I'll fetch them. You stay hidden. The wait felt interminable. Sarah fed Thomas goat's milk. Kanji Sapa stood at the window, his posture rigid, eyes scanning constantly, fingers flexing rhythmically at his sides. An hour later, Owen returned with an older man, carrying a medical bag, and a sharp-featured woman with a notebook. Dr. Keats examined Thomas, his movements practiced and efficient. He's healthy. But Mrs. Whitlow, you need rest and nutrition. He set a tonic bottle down. 3 times daily. Winifred read the documents, her eyes moving rapidly across the pages. This is damning evidence. I recognize these names, young women who came through town. Slade's men always hustled them away before I could speak to them. She swallowed hard, her expression tightening. I should have looked closer. We must get this to Marshal Valdez. She continued, her pen already moving. I can send a coded telegram, but we need more evidence, ideally the murder weapon. The sleigh Lewis supposedly died in, Owen said, suddenly snapping his fingers. I saw it in Slade's warehouse last week. Broken runner, all smashed up. Keats leaned forward, his expression intent. When I examined Lewis's body, the head wound wasn't consistent with a sleigh accident. The fracture suggested something smaller, harder, like a pistol butt or metal object. Then we need that runner, Winifred said decisively. But how? I can get it, Kengi Sapa said quietly. I moved silently, but I need a distraction. I'll create it, Sarah said firmly, her voice steady now. I'm the widow. I have reason to visit Slade's office asking about Lewis's effects. While they deal with me, Kanji Sapa can get the runner. Absolutely not, Kange Sapa said sharply, his hand cutting through the air. They can't arrest me for asking questions without drawing attention. Sarah insisted, her chin lifting. Every moment I occupy them is time you can use. Owen rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. It could work. I'll go with her. They planned carefully. At dusk, Sarah changed into a clean dress. Kanji Sapa gave her a long look, his eyes searching her face. If there's any danger, run. I'll find you. I will. She touched his hand briefly, feeling the calluses, the warmth. Be careful. His fingers closed around hers, lingering. And you? Night fell as they approached Sable Junction. Owen and Sarah walked openly toward the trading post, while Kanji Sapa melted into shadows. 2 guards stood near the warehouse. Sarah pushed open the trading post door, her pulse racing but her steps deliberate. Uriah Slade looked up, surprise flickering before his professional smile appeared. Mrs. Whitlow, how are you managing? Poorly, Mr. Slade. Sarah let her voice tremble slightly. I came to ask about my husband's personal effects. The tin box contained very little. I need his wedding ring, his watch, personal letters. Keepsakes for my son. Slade's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. I gave you everything we found. His wedding ring, he never removed it. Sarah's throat tightened, but she forced the words out. Perhaps the undertaker took it. I'm asking you, Mr. Slade. Sarah's voice rose, channeling genuine grief. My husband worked for you. He died on your route. I deserve his belongings. Other customers turned to watch. Slade's smile tightened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Mrs. Whitlow making a scene won't bring him back. I'm done with private discussions, Sarah said loudly, her hands clenching at her sides. I want answers. I want his belongings. And I want to know why Mercer is asking questions about me as if I've done something wrong. Outside, the guard's attention shifted toward the trading post. Kanji Sapa approached the warehouse side door silently, his footfalls making no sound. He worked his lockpick into the mechanism, his fingers steady and sure despite the urgency. The lock clicked. Inside, Slade came around the counter, his voice dropping to a threatening murmur. "You're making a mistake. A woman alone with a child? You need friends." Owen stepped between them, his weathered face set hard. The lady asked a legitimate question. "Stay out of this, Pike. Call in my loan. I'd rather lose my land than watch you bully a widow." The crowd grew, pressing forward. Slade realized he was losing control, his composure cracking. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. We'll go through the inventory properly." Sarah hesitated deliberately, her heart hammering. "Tomorrow morning, first thing." "Of course," Slade said, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. Sarah left with Owen. Behind them, Slade watched from the window, expression dangerous. In the warehouse, Kange Sapa found the sleigh and the broken runner. Even in dim light, he saw dark stains and a distinctive dent. He wrapped it in canvas, tucked it under his arm, and slipped out, locking the door behind him, his movements fluid and silent. They met at the town's edge. Owen and Sarah had kept Slade occupied for 15 minutes. Kange Sapa had the runner. Everything went according to plan. But as they hurried toward safety, Sarah felt they'd just lit a fuse, her stomach churning with apprehension. Dr. Keats examined the runner by lamplight, his expression growing grimmer. "This matches exactly. The dent dimensions match the skull fracture I observed on Lewis's body. This is blood. Your husband was beaten to death with this runner, and then the crash was staged." The words hung heavy. Sarah felt her knees weaken, spots dancing in her vision. Kange Sapa's hand steadied her elbow, his grip firm and grounding. "Someone with access to the sleigh authority to move it and reason to silence Lewis," Winifred said. "Mercer fits perfectly." "I've seen Mercer's pistol," Owen said. "Custom Colt Peacemaker with ivory grip, carved initials. He shows it off constantly. If the butt plate matches, then we have our murderer," Winifred finished. "I'm encoding a telegram to Marshal Valdez right now." "How long until he gets here?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 days in good weather. In this snow, maybe 3 or 4. Kange Sapa shook his head, his jaw set. "Mercer won't wait. He knows Mrs. Whitlow is being helped. He'll come soon with force." As if summoned hoofbeats approached rapidly. Owen cursed. "It's Mercer. At least 4 men. Torches and guns." Kange Sapa moved to gather Sarah and Thomas, his muscles coiling, but Owen raised a hand. "If you run, they'll track you down. Better to face them here with witnesses." The riders thundered into the yard. Mercer's voice. "Owen, Pike, send out the widow and the scout, or we're coming in." Owen stepped outside, hands visible. "What's this about, Sheriff?" Mercer dismounted, his hand resting on his holstered Colt. "I have a warrant for Kange Sapa for kidnapping, and questions for Mrs. Whitlow." "Kidnapping, she came here of her own free will. A white woman alone with a Lakota. They would falsely accuse it as kidnapping under local pretenses." Kange Sapa appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable, though tension radiated from his shoulders, his hands loose and ready at his sides. "I didn't take her against her will. I provided shelter." Mercer's hand moved toward his pistol. "Step aside, or I add resisting arrest." Dr. Keats moved forward. "Sheriff, as territorial physician, I'm informing you Mrs. Whitlow is under my medical care. She's suffering from exhaustion and trauma. Moving her would endanger both her and her infant." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like obstruction. That sounds like medicine, unless you want to explain to a judge why you ignored a physician's orders." The standoff stretched the air, crackling with tension. Finally, Mercer stepped back. Fine. 72 hours. But nobody leaves this homestead. I'm posting Deputy McRae on the road." He rode off, leaving the deputy, a young nervous man, sitting his horse awkwardly. Sarah watched him through the window, noticing the doubt in his face, the way his hands gripped the rifle too tightly, the conflict written in every line of his body. Inside, Sarah breathed properly for the first time, her chest loosening. "We have 3 days. He has to arrive in time," Winifred said. "I'm sending that telegram tonight." That night, Winifred walked to the telegraph office and encoded her message. "Urgent stop fraud murder. Conspiracy Sable Junction. Stop Sheriff Mercer and Uriah Slade. Running trafficking operation. Stop witness and evidence available. Stop marshal needed immediately. Stop Winifred Hale." She sent it 3 times and then encoded a second message to Helena. She was finishing when Slade entered. "Working late, Miss Hale." School board correspondence. Slade picked up the message tape. "This doesn't look like any school report. Latin botanical terminology. The board prefers scientific precision." Slade studied her, then set it down. "Just checking my equipment." The moment she left, Slade took the tape to Mercer. "The school teacher sent something in code. I'd bet it's about the widow." Mercer's face darkened. "How long until a marshal could get here?" 2-3 days. "Then we move at dawn. We take the widow by force, burn Pike's place, deal with that scout permanently. If a marshal shows up later, we say the scout went crazy." Mercer slammed his glass down. Slade hesitated. "That's risky." "Then they'll have accidents too," Mercer said coldly, buckling his gun belt with sharp, angry movements. "Dawn. Have your men ready." The night passed agonizingly. They took turns on watch. Just before dawn, Sarah gave up trying to sleep and joined Kangi Sapa at the window. "You should rest more," he said quietly. "I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see. Fear prepares you for danger, but you can't let it control you. Acknowledge it, then set it aside and do what must be done." "How do you do that?" "Practice and purpose. I'm afraid every time I hunt or cross thin ice or face armed men. But I have purpose to provide for my sister honor, my father's memory, protect those who can't protect themselves. Purpose gives fear a place without letting it take over." "What's your purpose now?" "To keep you and your son safe." Then quieter, "And perhaps something more than duty now." Sarah's breath caught her pulse quickening. Before she could respond, Owen's urgent whisper, "Fire the haystacks on fire." Flames leapt from the haystack, spreading to the barn with terrifying speed. Owen grabbed buckets, but Kangi Sapa caught his arm, his grip like iron. "It's a trap. They're flushing us out. If you go outside, they'll shoot you." "I lose everything. Save the animals, then run. I'll provide cover. Mrs. Whitlow, stay inside. Winifred, ready the horses, we're leaving now." Owen and Kangi Sapa burst outside. Heat was already intense flames roaring. Owen ran for the barn while Kangi Sapa scanned the tree line. His body tense and ready, his eyes sharp and focused. A rifle glint, he shouted warning as a shot splintered the barn door, missing Owen's head by inches. Kangi Sapa threw his knife with deadly accuracy. A scream rang out. Owen yanked the barn door open. Cattle stampeded out, followed by the goat and mule. Another shot drove him back. Sarah couldn't watch from safety, her maternal instincts overriding fear. She ran outside, grabbing Owen, her pulse racing. "Leave it, we have to go." A burning timber tumbled toward her. Kangi Sapa lunged, hitting her from the side, rolling them clear. Her skirt caught fire. He ripped off his coat and smothered the flames with his bare hands, moving with desperate speed. "Are you hurt?" "No, I don't." Sarah couldn't get proper breath, her chest heaving. "Breathe slowly. You're all right. I have you. Look at me. Just breathe." Sarah nodded, her breathing gradually steadying, anchored by his voice, by the certainty in his eyes. Around them, the barn collapsed. The nanny goat lay dead shot deliberately. Everything Owen owned was burning. Winifred appeared with horses. Ride now, or not at all. They mounted and galloped away as Mercer and his men emerged from the trees. Mercer fired. The shot went wide. He screamed and swung onto his horse to give chase. Kangji Sapa led them through rough terrain, his eyes constantly scanning every sense alert. Finally, they dropped into a ravine, ending at a dark mine entrance. Copper Creek Mine, where Lewis had supposedly died. Inside quickly. Kangji Sapa ordered, his voice hard. The main chamber is stable. We can defend the entrance, they'll have to come one at a time. They led the horses inside, then continued deeper on foot. Kangji Sapa lit a torch, revealing a larger chamber with rusted ore carts and scattered tools. Sarah's foot caught on something. Looking down, she saw rotted canvas concealing a leather satchel. She recognized it, Lewis's document case. This is Lewis's. He was here. He must have hidden it before they killed him. Her hands shook as she opened it, her fingers fumbling with the buckles. Inside were more ledger pages and a detailed journal, months of observations, dates, amounts, names. Not just victims, but corrupt officials, a complete map of the operation. And tucked in a side pocket, a small leather-bound notebook with dates and locations of meetings. Names of other conspirators Lewis had tracked, detailed notes about money transfers. She also found a folded piece of paper, a map Lewis had drawn, showing the locations where women had been taken with annotations in his neat handwriting. He knew they were going to kill him. Sarah whispered, tears streaming her chest, tightening with grief and pride. He hid this so someone would find it, so his death wouldn't be for nothing. He fought until the very end. Then we make certain it wasn't. Kangji Sapa said, securing the journal carefully, his jaw set with determination. This is even more damning, Keats said, examining the documents. Names, dates, bank transfers, a complete map. And this notebook, it implicates territorial officials, judges. This goes all the way to Helena. Which means Mercer can't let us leave alive. Owen said, his voice grim. Then we defend, Kangji Sapa said, his shoulders squaring. One entrance, narrow, approached solid walls. We can hold until the marshal arrives. They established defensive positions. Thomas slept peacefully, unaware. Dr. Keats treated everyone's injuries. We were extremely lucky. We're not lucky, Sarah said, finding Kangji Sapa's eyes across the chamber, her voice steady now. We're alive because some people refuse to abandon others. That's not luck. That's humanity at its finest. Kangji Sapa held her gaze. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, respect, and something deeper. Outside, hoofbeats echoed. Long silence, then Mercer's voice boomed. I know you're in there. Come out, or I'll bury you alive. Kangji Sapa waited in silence, knife ready, positioning himself between the entrance and Sarah, his breathing controlled and even his muscles coiled. Mercer tried again. Mrs. Whitlow, Mrs., that savage is using you. Come out and I'll protect you. You have my word as an officer. Sarah moved forward despite Kangji Sapa's restraining hand. Your word means nothing. You murdered my husband. I have proof, the runner with his blood. Dr. Keats' testimony and Lewis's complete journal. He hid it here before you killed him. You're finished, Mercer. Terrible silence. Then, you stupid woman. You think anyone will believe you over me? I am the law here. Now I can't let you leave that mind breathing. A younger voice, Deputy McRae. Sheriff, maybe we should wait for the marshal. We can't just murder them all. There's a baby in there. Shut your mouth, Tim. You're either with me or against me. Choose now. Long pause. I'm with you, Sheriff. But this doesn't sit right. None of this sits right anymore. Your conscience can sit however it wants after. Charlie Buckskin, you go in first. Shoot anyone except the woman and baby. Tim, you're coming in behind them to prove your loyalty. Kangi Sapa pulled Sarah back, his body blocking hers, his hand firm on her arm. Stay behind me. You protect Thomas, I protect you. Two men entered cautiously with torches and rifles. Kangi Sapa waited until they were committed, and then doused his torch and struck. A grunt of pain, a rifle clattering. He relit the torch. One man lay unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. The second man, Buckskin, backed away, shouting for help, his voice echoing through the mine. Kangi Sapa fired a warning shot that ricocheted dangerously. Buckskin fled, nearly trampling Deputy McRae entering. McRae froze, staring at the unconscious man, then at Kangi Sapa, his rifle half raised. Their eyes met. McRae's face was torn, sweat beading on his forehead. Despite the cold, his hands trembling. Then McRae saw Thomas, the baby, in Sarah's arms, so small, so innocent, sleeping peacefully despite the violence. His face crumpled. He stared at the child for a long moment, his Adam's apple working as he swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. The rifle wavered in his hands. Don't do this. Sarah called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You're not like Mercer. I've seen the doubt in your eyes. You're a good man being forced to do evil things. But you have a choice. Don't make yourself complicit in murdering a baby. Look at him. He's innocent. Just like those women you helped Mercer and Slade steal from. When does it end, Deputy McRae? When do you finally say no? McRae's hands slowly lowered the rifle, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his conscience. I kept records of everything Mercer made me do. Backdating contracts, falsifying documents, threatening people. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid. His voice broke, tears finally spilling down his face. When Lewis Whitlow came to me with his suspicions, I told Mercer instead of helping him. I as good as killed him myself. I should have stopped this months ago, years ago. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Then help us now. Sarah urged, her voice gentle but firm. The marshal is coming. You can testify. You can make this right. It's not too late to be the man you want to be. Before McRae could respond, Mercer roared from outside. Tim, what's taking so long? Finish him or I'll finish you. You hear me, boy? You come out of that mine right now, or you're next. McRae looked back toward the entrance, and then at Sarah, at Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms. He made his choice. He turned deliberately and walked toward the entrance, calling out with newfound strength. They're too well defended, Sheriff. We need more men, better weapons. And there's a baby in here. We can't just... A gunshot. McRae cried out, clutching his arm where Mercer's bullet grazed him, blood seeping through his fingers, staining his sleeve dark. He stumbled back into the mine, his face white with shock and betrayal, gasping in pain. Anyone else want to grow a conscience? Mercer shouted, his voice echoing with fury. This is what happens to traitors. This is what happens when you betray me. You're all dead, every last one of you. Now Mercer knew they were armed, dangerous, and that his own deputy had turned against him. The situation had escalated to full siege. For 3 agonizing hours, nothing happened. Mercer waited outside with deadly patience, occasionally calling threats. Inside, they rationed water. Temperature dropped steadily, their breath fogging. Keats bandaged McRae's wound while the deputy sat pale but relieved, his breathing gradually steadying. Thank you for choosing right, Sarah said quietly, taking his uninjured hand, feeling it trembling. For seeing Thomas. For remembering your humanity. McRae shook his head, tears tracking through dirt. I should have done it months ago. When Lewis came to me with suspicions, I told Mercer instead. I helped them kill him. All those women, I knew where they were being taken. I knew what was happening to them. And I did nothing. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. You're helping now. That's what matters. That's what Lewis would want, for someone to finally do the right thing. Temperature continued dropping dangerously. We can't stay much longer, Owen said, his voice grim. We'll freeze by morning, even if Mercer never attacks. We need another way out. Kanji Sapa studied the walls, running his hands over faint carvings, his brow furrowed in concentration, his movements deliberate. There's another way out. The old emergency shaft. This map carved in the stone shows a secondary tunnel toward the river. Miners always built escape routes. That tunnel could be collapsed, Keats warned. Staying guarantees death from cold. We must try. They moved deeper, following passages that grew narrower and more unstable. Water dripped constantly, freezing into icicles. The air smelled of rust and decay and old death. The secondary shaft was where indicated but severely collapsed. A jumbled pile of rocks and rotted timbers blocked most of the passage, with only a narrow gap at the top, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I'll go first, Kangi Sapa said, already assessing the climb. If it's stable, you follow one at a time. He looked at Sarah, reaching to touch her face briefly, his calloused fingers gentle against her cold cheek. If it collapses, go back immediately. Protect Thomas above all. Don't wait for me. No, Sarah said firmly, her chin lifting, her eyes locked on his. We go together or not at all. I won't be separated from you now. Not after everything we've survived. We make it out together or not at all. Kanji Sapa's jaw tightened, emotions warring across his usually controlled face. Surprise, concern, and something deeper. Then he nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. He began climbing carefully, testing each hold meticulously before trusting his weight. His broad shoulders barely fit through the gap. Rock scraped against skin. Then he was through. It's stable, come quickly. Owen went next, then helped pull Winifred through with effort, her dress tearing. Keats passed Thomas up with infinite care, Sarah's heart lodged in her throat, her arms reaching desperately. Then Sarah squeezed through rocks, scraping brutally, drawing blood, her ribs screaming in protest. McRae came last, wincing and gasping as his wounded arm scraped rock, leaving blood smears behind. The passage beyond was in better condition, shored up with old timbers that had somehow held. They followed it downward, the sound of running water growing louder until they emerged near the frozen river, gulping cold, clean air. Night had fallen. Stars were brilliant overhead, countless and eternal. They were free. No immediate sign of Mercer. The marshal will meet us at the telegraph office. Winifred said, her voice hoarse but determined. We can defend their brick construction public building. Mercer can't burn it without the whole town seeing. They walked through darkness toward town's distant lights, a ragged group of survivors. Sarah's legs shook violently, but Kange Sapa stayed beside her, his solid presence lending her strength. When she stumbled badly, his arm came around her waist, holding her upright. She leaned into him without hesitation, drawing warmth and strength from his body. Almost there, he murmured near her ear, his breath warm against her cold skin. You can do this. You've come so far. Just a little farther. I know I can, Sarah whispered back, her voice gaining strength. Because you're with me. Because you never gave up on us. I trust you completely with my life. With Thomas's life. She felt him tense at those words, his arm tightening protectively around her waist. They walked in silence for a moment. Two people who'd survived impossible odds together, bound by something neither could fully name yet. They reached Sable Junction near midnight, the town mostly dark and quiet. Winifred unlocked the telegraph office with shaking hands. Inside, she immediately checked the equipment, her fingers flying over familiar keys. A message was waiting, clearly marked urgent. She decoded it rapidly, and her pale face broke into a smile of profound relief, tears streaming. Marshal Valdez departed Tin Cup with 6 armed deputies this morning. Expects to arrive Sable Junction by dawn. Hold evidence and witnesses secure. Federal authority engaged. Justice coming. He's coming. Winifred breathed, sinking into a chair, her legs finally giving out. Just a few more hours. We made it. We actually made it. But even as relief flooded through them, the telegraph began chattering again, with new incoming message, the sound ominous in the quiet office. Winifred's face went deathly pale. As she read the decoded text, her hands shaking so badly, the paper rattled audibly. It's from Uriah Slade's paid contact in the Helena telegraph office, she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Warning Slade that Marshal Valdez is definitely en route with armed deputies and to expect imminent federal charges for fraud, trafficking, and murder. Someone in the marshal's office is on Slade's payroll. They know he's coming. They know exactly when he'll arrive. Owen slammed his fist on the desk, hard enough to make equipment jump. So Mercer knows for certain the marshal arrives at dawn. He'll make his final move tonight, no more waiting, no more strategy. This is his last chance to silence us, and he knows it. Desperate men do desperate things. Kangi Sapa moved to the window, peering cautiously through the shutters, his body coiled tight with readiness, every muscle tense. Then we prepare for siege. This building has strong brick walls and only 2 entrances. We can defend it if we're vigilant and fortunate. Keats distributed improvised weapons with grim efficiency, heavy telegraph equipment that could serve as clubs, a sharp letter opener that could work as a desperate knife, Owen's rifle. With its precious few remaining bullets, a heavy wrench from the supply closet. They barricaded both doors solidly, with furniture desks, chairs, filing cabinets, and waited in tense silence, the only sound Thomas's soft breathing and the distant piano music from the saloon, incongruously cheerful. The attack came exactly 1 hour later, sudden and overwhelming in its violence. They heard horses approaching fast, multiple riders. Then Mercer's voice shouting orders outside. But instead of negotiation or threats, glass exploded inward from both windows simultaneously without warning. Torches came flying through the shattered openings, trailing flame and sparks. The torches landed on the wooden floor where coal oil had already been splashed. They could smell it now, acrid and choking. Fire spread instantly, with terrifying speed, flames racing across the boards in all directions, fed by the accelerant. "They're not waiting," Owen shouted, his voice rising above the sudden roar of flame. "They lit it already. No negotiation. They're just burning us out." Everyone dove for cover. As more liquid splashed against both doors from outside, they could hear it sloshing, smell the sharp scent of kerosene. Someone touched torches to the soaked wood. Fires caught instantly, flames licking up both door frames with hungry eagerness, heat building rapidly. The back door, too. They heard Slade's voice from that direction, high with panic and murderous excitement. "This one's soaked, light it up, burn them all, no survivors." Trapped completely on all sides. Fire spreading along both entrances, with terrifying speed smoke beginning to fill the office, thick and black and choking. Thomas woke and began coughing, his small face scrunching his cries, weak and frightened. Sarah wrapped him tighter in her shawl, trying desperately to filter the smoke with cloth, her own eyes streaming tears, lungs burning with every breath. Winifred rushed to the telegraph through the thickening smoke, her professional instincts overriding fear. Her fingers flew over the keys, even as she coughed violently, blood flecking her lips, sending one final desperate message in clear, unencoded text that anyone monitoring would understand. "To all Montana territory, Stop Sheriff Mercer murdering witnesses. Stop widow and infant trapped telegraph office. Sable Junction. Stop building on fire. Stop help needed immediately. Stop anyone who can hear this. Stop Winifred Hale. She sent it 3 times, her fingers moving even as smoke overwhelmed her, her eyes barely able to see the keys, coughing so hard she could barely breathe, but determined to get the message out. Then she collapsed over the equipment, overcome by smoke. Outside, Mercer's voice carried clearly through the roar of flames. Smoke them out when they run, shoot them all. Don't let anyone escape. I want bodies. The smoke grew impossibly thick, visibility dropping to almost nothing. The heat was already unbearable, sweat and soot streaming down their faces. Sarah could barely breathe, barely see consciousness, beginning to slip at the edges, her head swimming. Thomas's cries had grown weaker, more desperate, his small body convulsing with coughs. "We have to get out," Keats shouted, doubled over, coughing, his face gray. "The roof will collapse within minutes. We'll be burned alive." Kangi Sapa looked around desperately through the smoke, his eyes streaming but still sharp, still focused, searching for any option, any chance. Then his gaze fixed on the brick wall, shared with the adjacent building. "The wall. We break through to the general store next door. It's our only chance." He grabbed the heavy iron telegraph sounder base and began smashing it against the brick with all his considerable strength, his muscles bulging with effort, sweat and soot covering his face. Owen joined immediately, with an axe he'd grabbed earlier, attacking the mortar between bricks. McRae helped, despite his wounded arm, using a heavy wrench, all of them coughing violently, but not stopping, refusing to give up. The wall was solid, built to last, but the mortar was old, crumbling under their desperate assault. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, they began to break through brick dust, mixing with the smoke, making breathing even harder, choking them. Outside, Mercer heard the pounding through the roar of flames. "They're breaking through, Buckskin. Get around to the store and stop them. Kill anyone who comes through that wall." The smoke was deadly now, thick as fog, black and toxic. Sarah could barely breathe, barely see, her vision tunneling, consciousness slipping. Thomas had stopped crying, gone ominously quiet in her arms. She couldn't tell if he was breathing. Panic seized her. She shook him gently. No response. Thomas. Her voice came out as a desperate rasp. Kangi Sapa and Owen redoubled their efforts. Muscles straining past human limits, sweat and soot, streaming, coughing with every breath, but attacking the wall with savage desperation. A brick came loose, clattering to the floor. Then another. Then a whole section collapsed inward with a crash, creating a gap barely large enough for a person to squeeze through, jagged edges and broken brick everywhere. "Go!" Kangi Sapa shouted hoarsely to Sarah, his voice raw from smoke. "Take Thomas and go now, right now." Sarah stumbled toward the gap, clutching Thomas's frighteningly still form, her legs barely working. She pushed through, feeling sharp edges, tear her dress, scrape her skin brutally, but not caring, focused only on getting her son to clean air. On the other side, she gasped desperately, gulping cleaner air, patting Thomas's back frantically. He coughed a weak, beautiful sound and began crying. Relief flooded through her so powerfully, she nearly collapsed. Winifred came through, next half, conscious, Keats supporting her. Then McRae gasping and bleeding. Owen squeezed through, his shirt torn and smoking. Kangi Sapa came last, just as a section of the telegraph office roof collapsed behind him with a deafening crash, sending a massive shower of sparks and burning debris through the gap he'd just exited, flames reaching for him like grasping hands. They found themselves in the general store's back room, coughing violently, gasping for air, their lungs burning, eyes streaming. Through the front windows, they could see townspeople beginning to emerge from buildings, drawn by the massive fire, and the commotion, pointing and shouting, the crowd growing rapidly. Buckskin was at the store's front door, rifle raised, blocking their exit, his face hard and determined. "Nobody moves? You're all under arrest. First one who tries to leave gets shot." But then a woman's voice rang out from the gathering crowd, strong and clear, cutting through the night. "You put that gun down right now, Buckskin. There's a baby in there. A baby. Are you really going to murder a baby for Mercer? Is that who you are? Is that who any of us are?" Other voices joined rapidly, a growing chorus of protest and outrage, townspeople finally finding their collective voice after years of fear and silence. The crowd was growing quickly, swelling, pressing forward with righteous anger, finally unleashed, no longer willing to stand silent. Buckskin hesitated, his rifle wavering, uncertainty crossing his face, sweat beading despite the cold. But Mercer said, "Mercer's a murderer." Another voice from the crowd, a man's this time, strong and angry. "We all knew it deep down. We just didn't want to believe it, didn't want to be the ones to stand up first and pay the price. But no more. We won't let him do this. Not to a woman and baby, not in our town, not in our names." The crowd grew rapidly, more people emerging from buildings, pressing forward with collective courage they'd lacked, individually faces hard with determination. Buckskin backed away, overwhelmed by sheer numbers, by the weight of communal judgment. He lowered his rifle, slowly turned, and ran into the darkness, disappearing between buildings. Mercer appeared in the street, then his face twisted with rage and desperation, his movements erratic, clearly drunk, his expensive coat disheveled. "Get back to your homes, all of you. This is official law enforcement business. I am the law here. I am the law." "You're not the law," Mrs. Henderson shouted from the front of the crowd. The elderly woman who ran the boarding house. Her voice shaking but firm, her cane raised like a weapon. "You're a criminal, a murderer. We know what you and Slade did to those women. We know what you did to Lewis Whitlow. We're done being afraid of you. You don't own this town anymore." Mercer raised his pistol with shaking hands, aiming it at the crowd, his finger on the trigger, his face mottled with rage. "I said, get back. I'll shoot. I swear to God, I'll shoot all of you if I have to." A shot rang out suddenly, not from Mercer's gun, but from behind him. Uriah Slade, seeing everything collapsing around him, his entire empire crumbling, his wealth and power evaporating, had panicked completely and fired his own pistol into the air, trying desperately to scatter the crowd, to regain control through fear and intimidation. But the effect was opposite. The gunshot galvanized the townspeople rather than frightening them. They surged forward with renewed anger, no longer afraid of bullets or badges or threats, finally united against tyranny, finally willing to stand together. Mercer grabbed Slade by the collar violently, his face inches from the other man, screaming, "Run! We have to run now. It's over. Everything's over." But there was nowhere left to run. The telegraph office was a massive inferno now. Flames reaching toward the stars like a beacon, lighting up the entire street, visible for miles, announcing their crimes to the world. Smoke billowed into the night sky. And in the distance, unmistakable and growing louder, came the sound of multiple horses approaching at full gallop, organized, disciplined riders with purpose, the rhythm of justice coming at last. Federal Marshal Rafael Valdez and his 6 armed deputies rode into Sable Junction like an avenging force, their badges gleaming in the firelight, their Winchester rifles held ready across their saddles, their faces grim with purpose and authority. They took in the scene instantly, with experienced eyes, the massive fire consuming the telegraph office. The armed confrontation in the street, the crowd of townspeople facing down Mercer and Slade, the refugees emerging from the general store covered in soot and blood and ash, the baby crying in a woman's arms. Roland Mercer, Mir. Valdez's voice carried absolute authority, trained and powerful, cutting through all the chaos and noise like a blade through silk. "You are under arrest by federal authority for murder conspiracy to commit murder fraud, kidnapping and selling women, arson, and attempted murder of federal witnesses. Drop your weapon immediately and surrender." Mercer looked around wildly, his eyes moving frantically from face to face, seeing no escape, no allies, no way out. His entire world ending in fire and judgment. His hand tightened on his pistol knuckles, white, his whole body shaking from drink, from rage, from fear, from the desperate realization that he'd lost everything. "I'm not going to hang," he said, his voice flat and dead, all emotion burned out, defeated but defiant to the end. "I won't give you that satisfaction. I won't dance at the end of a rope for you people." He raised the Colt Peacemaker toward Valdez, with shaking hands, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated from whiskey. 3 federal deputies fired simultaneously, their shots echoing as one in the cold night air. Mercer went down hard, his pistol clattering to the frozen ground, blood spreading dark beneath him in the snow, pooling and steaming in the cold, his body jerking once and then going still. Slade tried desperately to run, his expensive boots slipping on ice. But Owen Pike tackled him from behind with a flying leap. Years of suppressed anger and hatred finally released. Within seconds, the enraged townspeople had Slade pinned to the frozen ground, all their years of fear and silence transformed into physical force. Holding him down as he struggled and screamed and begged, his smooth voice finally breaking his composure, shattered completely. The volunteer fire brigade arrived quickly and began fighting the telegraph office blaze with organized bucket chains, though the building was clearly lost, flames having consumed most of the structure. Roof caved in completely. As dawn broke over Sable Junction in shades of gold and rose and purple, painting the snow crimson and orange with reflected firelight, Marshal Valdez's deputies rounded up the remaining hired guns efficiently and methodically, shackling them one by one. Deputy McRae, despite his wounded arm, helped identify them all and began giving detailed testimony on the spot, his voice steady and strong, now finally unburdened, finally free of the weight he'd carried for so long. Sarah stood in the middle of the street, holding Thomas close to her chest, watching justice finally truly being served after so much suffering, hardly able to believe they were still alive, still breathing, still together. She felt Kangi Sapa's presence beside her before she heard him, felt his solid warmth, his hand resting lightly but firmly on her shoulder, grounding her, reminding her this was real. "It is finished," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from smoke, but carrying profound relief. "It's finally over." Sarah turned to him. This man who had saved her life, repeatedly fought beside her through impossible odds, risked everything for her and her son without asking anything in return, who had shown her what true courage and honor looked like. Without conscious thought, overwhelmed by emotion and gratitude, and something deeper, she was finally ready to acknowledge, she reached up and touched his scarred face with trembling fingers, her fingertips tracing the old wound gently, tenderly, learning every line. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion she could no longer contain. "For everything. For my life. For Thomas's life. For showing me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it, to keep going when everything seems lost. For being there every single moment when I needed you most, when I had no one else, when the world seemed determined to crush us. For never giving up, never leaving us behind." Kangi Sapa's hand came up slowly to cover hers, pressing her palm firmly against his cheek, his skin warm beneath her touch despite the cold. His eyes closing briefly, as if savoring the contact and the connection between them. "You showed me something equally important," he said, his voice low and intimate despite the crowd and chaos around them, despite the dawn and the fire and the death speaking only to her. "That some bonds transcend all the boundaries others would place on them. That family is not defined by blood or law or tradition, but by choice, by the deliberate decision to stand together, to care for each other, to refuse to abandon those who need us. You are the bravest person I have ever known, Sarah Whitlow. You and your son have taught me that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest strength is simply refusing to surrender hope, even when death seems certain. Around them, the town was coming alive, with communal purpose and shared humanity, people helping each other, tending wounds, offering shelter and blankets, and hot coffee, sharing food and warmth. The community finally united through their shared ordeal and collective stand against evil. Dr. Keats was already organizing medical care for the injured, his voice calm and authoritative, despite his own exhaustion. Winifred was taking detailed statements from witnesses, her notebook filling rapidly with testimony. Owen Pike was helping coordinate the firefighting efforts, his burned homestead already becoming a memory, as he focused on helping others finding new purpose in community service. And Sarah and Kangi Sapa stood together in the growing dawn light, not speaking further, not needing words, bound by something deeper than language. A partnership forged in survival, tempered by shared hardship and danger, strengthened by mutual respect and growing affection that transcended all the boundaries their different worlds tried to impose on them. It wasn't the fairy tale romance of storybooks, but something far more real and lasting, built on trust earned through fire and blood and ice, on shared struggle, on the deliberate choice to stand together when the entire world seemed arrayed against them. The trial took place 2 weeks later in the Sable Junction schoolhouse, hastily converted into a proper courtroom for the occasion. Federal Judge Augustus Horn presided, a stern man with white hair and an established reputation throughout the territory for absolute fairness and incorruptible justice, his gaveling echoing like fate itself. Uriah Slade was tried first on multiple counts, convicted on overwhelming evidence provided by Deputy McRae's meticulously kept records and the testimony of 32 rescued women who had been found in various mining camps throughout the territory. Their voices finally heard, their stories finally believed, their suffering finally acknowledged. He was sentenced to 20 years hard labor in the territorial prison at Deer Lodge. His considerable wealth seized by the government, his business empire dismantled and auctioned, his name forever synonymous with corruption and cruelty. Sheriff Roland Mercer had died of his wounds before trial, bleeding out in the snow while watching his world burn. Some said it was too easy an end for such a man, that he deserved to face his victims in court, to hear their testimonies, to understand fully the scope of his crimes before meeting justice. Others argued that dying alone in the snow like a dog, abandoned and unmourned, watching everything he'd built collapse around him, was its own form of perfect justice, poetic and fitting. Marshal Valdez approached Sarah privately after the proceedings concluded, his weathered face kind beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Mrs. Whitlow, the territorial government is seizing all of Slade's considerable assets under a federal court order for forfeiture. As the widow of the man who exposed this entire conspiracy at the cost of his own life, whose courage and determination brought these criminals to justice, you are legally entitled to substantial restitution for your suffering and loss. He handed her a provisional compensation payment, the paper crisp and official with impressive seals. $500 as an immediate advance. Considerably more will come once the courts settle all the various claims and liquidate the seized properties. Your husband's courage and sacrifice saved dozens of women from terrible fates. The territory owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Sarah stared at the money in stunned disbelief, her hands shaking, tears welling in her eyes and spilling down her cheeks. Marshal, this is more than I ever imagined, more than I thought possible. I don't know what to say. Use it to build a good, honest life for yourself and that boy, Valdez said gently, his weathered face creasing with a genuine smile, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. That's the best possible revenge against men like them, living well and prosperously and freely despite everything they tried to destroy, building something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. Your husband would want that more than anything. He died trying to give you and your son a future. Honor his memory by living that future fully and without fear. Over the following weeks and months, as winter gradually released its iron grip on Montana territory, and spring began to whisper promises of renewal through the melting snow, Sarah used her restitution money to buy 40 acres of good fertile land near the Little Crow River, within comfortable sight of Nayeli's camp, where the water ran clear and cold, and the soil was dark and rich with promise. With Kangi Sapa's expert help and guidance, Owen Pike's willing and enthusiastic assistance, and the support of grateful townspeople who hadn't forgotten her courage or the price she'd paid for justice, she built a small but sturdy cabin, one large room with a proper stone fireplace that drew well a sleeping loft for privacy and warmth, and a wide covered porch facing east toward the sunrise over the distant mountains, watching lights spill across the valley each morning like liquid gold, like hope made visible. She spent considerable time at Nayeli's camp, learning Lakota skills and language with dedicated focus and genuine respect, her hands, learning to work leather properly and identify healing plants, her ears learning the musical flow of new words and concepts. The women of the camp gradually warmed to her when they saw her sincere willingness to learn and her genuine respect for their ways, teaching her their skills with increasing generosity, accepting her presence, and eventually her friendship welcoming her as sister and family. And Kangi Sapa visited the cabin, often bringing fresh game from his successful hunts, helping with the heavy physical work of building and farming, teaching both Sarah and young Thomas how to survive and thrive in the harsh but beautiful territory. His presence becoming as natural and necessary as breathing, as essential as water, woven into the fabric of their daily lives. One evening in late summer, as sunset painted the vast Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson and purple that seemed to go on forever, stretching from horizon to horizon in breathtaking beauty, Sarah and Kangi Sapa sat together on the cabin porch in comfortable silence, while Thomas played contentedly at their feet with the carved wooden animals Nayeli had made for him, babbling happily in sounds that mixed English and Lakota, equally innocent of the divisions the world would try to impose on him as he grew. "I've been thinking," Sarah said carefully, after a long silence, her heart pounding with nervous anticipation, "about what happens when winter comes again. Thomas will need more than just me. He'll need family who can teach him the skills to survive in this harsh land, to understand and navigate both worlds he'll have to live in to be strong enough to face whatever challenges come. He will need family," Kangi Sapa agreed quietly, his eyes on the distant mountains, their peaks still snow-capped and eternal against the darkening sky. Not just a mother, but others who care for him deeply and will guide him wisely, teach him essential skills, protect him when protection is needed. "Yes," Sarah said, gathering her courage, her voice growing stronger. "And I was thinking, hoping that you might consider staying close to us. Permanently. Not as a hired hand or helper or friend passing through, but as someone who truly belongs here. With us. As family." Kangi Sapa was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes still on the mountains, his expression unreadable. Then, "What we are building here together, it is not traditional for my people or yours. It defies the conventions and expectations of both our worlds. There will be talk, judgment from both sides, difficulties and challenges we cannot yet foresee. But it is honest, and it is based on mutual respect and trust that was forged in fire and hardship and blood-tested in ways few partnerships ever face, and somehow proven stronger for it. That is more than sufficient foundation to build something lasting, something real." He reached out and took her hand, his rough, calloused fingers intertwining with hers, their hands fitting together perfectly. "I will stay close to you and Thomas. I will hunt to provide meat for your table. I will help you maintain this home we've built and work the land we'll cultivate together. I will teach the boy everything I know, how to track and hunt, how to read the weather and survive the winters, how to move through the world with honor and courage, not for payment or obligation or debt, but because I want to see you both safe and thriving, because I have come to care for you more deeply than I thought possible, because somewhere in all that darkness and danger and death we survived together, I found something I did not expect to find, something I thought I would never have, never deserve. What did you find? Sarah whispered, hardly daring to breathe, her heart racing, the world narrowing to just his face, his eyes, his hand in hers. Purpose. Kangi Sapa said, simply placing his free hand over his heart, his voice carrying profound emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. And perhaps something more, something that has no adequate name in either of our languages, but that I feel here in my chest when I am with you, when I think of you and Thomas, when I imagine a future that includes all of us together as family, as something more than separate individuals merely surviving side by side. Sarah felt tears, good tears this time, tears of joy and relief and love finally acknowledged. She squeezed his hand tightly, her other hand coming up to cover his where it rested over his heart, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. I feel it too. Every day. Every moment you're near us. I didn't think I could feel this way again. After losing Lewis, didn't think my heart had room or capacity. But you showed me that the heart has more capacity. Then we know that love comes in many forms, that family can be built through choice and commitment and shared struggle, rather than just blood and law. They sat together as the sun set completely, and stars emerged one by one across the vast Montana sky, not needing to speak, further bound by something deeper and more permanent than words, a partnership forged in survival, tempered by unimaginable hardship and strengthened by mutual respect and growing affection and love that transcended all the boundaries their different worlds tried to impose. It wasn't the fairy tale romance of storybooks, with grand gestures and passionate declarations, but something far more real and lasting, built on trust earned through blood and fire and ice, on shared struggle and suffering, on the simple but profound choice to stand together when standing alone would have been easier, on the deliberate decision to care for each other when no law or custom required it. Thomas babbled happily at their feet, unaware that his future had just been secured, not through legal marriage or social convention or traditional family structure, but through something far more powerful and meaningful. The deliberate choice of two people to build a life together, to create family through commitment and love rather than ceremony and contract, to stand together against whatever challenges the harsh Montana territory might bring, to choose each other consciously and freely every single day. Years later, Thomas would grow up strong and capable and confident, fluent in 2 languages, and comfortable in 2 very different cultures, learning from his mother's determination and fierce love, and Kangi Sapa's wisdom and patient teaching, equally carrying both worlds in his heart without conflict. He would understand and honor the truth that Lewis Whitlow had given him life, and a powerful legacy of courage and integrity. The example of a man willing to die for justice and truth, and that Kangi Sapa had given him survival skills and a home and protection, and the living daily example of what it meant to be a good man, to keep one's word, to stand by those who needed you regardless of personal cost. Both were his fathers in different but equally important ways. Both mattered deeply to his formation and character, and both would want him to be brave enough and strong enough to stand against injustice wherever he found it, to protect those weaker than himself, to live with honor and integrity. And Sarah Whitlow, who had come to Montana territory as a desperate widow with a dying baby, with nothing but grief and fear and borrowed hope, built a homestead and a life that defied convention, but honored truth and love. She never remarried legally, Such a formal union with a Lakota man remained legally impossible in that time and place, the laws explicitly forbidding it, society condemning it as unthinkable. But what she shared with Kangi Sapa proved more genuine and lasting than most legal marriages blessed by church and state. They built something together that outlasted scandal and prejudice and whispered judgment, a true partnership based on absolute equality, mutual respect, earned through shared hardship. And the deep understanding that family is defined not by law or blood or tradition, but by who shows up when you desperately need them most and chooses to stay when times get hard, who stands beside you when the world burns around you and never once flinches or looks away. The snow still fell heavy in Montana Territory winters, piling deep and lasting long. The wind still howled mercilessly across the plains and through the mountain passes, testing everyone who dared to live in its path. Rivers still froze solid for months at a time, and the land remained harsh and unforgiving to the careless or unprepared. But inside the cabin, Sarah and Kangi Sapa had built together with their own hands and determination and love. There existed warmth and safety and laughter, and the certain promise that tomorrow would come, and they would face it together as they had faced everything else, side by side, hand in hand, bound by choices made freely and renewed daily. Two souls who had found each other in darkness and decided to walk toward the light together, building something beautiful from ashes and loss, proving that love and family transcend all boundaries when people are brave enough to choose them.